Hey everybody, welcome to the last ever JodoCast video. We're shutting it down. This is the last of the Star Wars Legion Rules update preview article discussion videos that we've been doing since last week. The last of Atomic Mass Games previews for new rules, which will be launching fully on January 16th, is out. And today they were talking about movement. I'd like to do a little throwback to the pass rule video, where in their article they said that this was absolutely the biggest change of all of them. And it's interesting to me that that was
No,
their
didn't that
opinion.
oh, yeah, they did say that during the
The
past one.
past one, they said it was the biggest of all of their changes, or the most groundbreaking or shaking or whatever. Okay, so there's basically two things they're going over with the movement rules. One is changing how basic trooper point A to point B works, but they're not really changing it. They're basically making it how everybody already does it. Um, am I correct in that? Like the first rule's technically a change, but functionally won't make a difference to
For most
anybody.
people. So
Such a minor.
the way movement works right now is, you put your movement template up against the MIDI, and then technically speaking, you're supposed to slide like your mini travels along the template to get to the other end of it or wherever
This
on the
would
template you decide to stop. Um, And most of the time, though, this doesn't matter, and nobody does this because there's always plenty of space, usually for like a small base mini to move without having to worry about sliding it along the base to make sure it can fit through. Um, this does lead to people playing a little sloppy sometimes, where maybe you put the movement template too close to the edge of a building or something like that, and so technically your mini couldn't move along the path that the movement template
right.
had, but outside of
I like a couple millimeters.
yeah, outside of
Right.
like
They should have just
major
originally
tournament
made the
play, I don't think you really see
yeah,
people calling each other on that ever.
the
Everyone,
template
most of
should
the
have
time,
just
people just pick up from the end, one end, and put it at the other end, and as long as the template
um
can go there, it's good. um
yeah.
and
So the
And
new
so
the new
that's
against
rule is
now
that's how you play it. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's now how it's going to work, is you don't
yeah,
So
have to slide it along the
your
template.
yeah, your template can now legally be fully pushed up against like the side of a building. And as long as like where you start and where you stop are free, you're good.
Yes.
Which is how
um
most people have been playing,
and
but
then there's also some changes about moving over terrain, and this
this
applies
is a bigger change.
yeah, and this applies to not just small base troopers. I should say anything with a notched base still need to slide it along the template, because those are bigger,
facing
representing
Right.
matters
bigger
There's
things.
usually.
There's a
So
lot of instances where like I've got my ATRT and I'm like, I'm gonna just round this corner. Oh, turns out there's just no way I can put my template without the base clipping the building as I go, and I can't make this move, which is annoying.
yeah, so then you have to
Especially
do a
on
rotate, and
yeah,
yeah.
it's I find it annoying especially on units like the ATRT where the miniature is so much narrower than the base itself.
Yeah.
I'm like, it should have some wiggle room here, but whatever. That's still the same as it's always been.
Yeah.
Uh,
But the other change now, this does apply to all base types, all unit types, is that you can now move over top of any piece of terrain as long as it is your height or less, um,
the height of your
the
silhouette
height of
or
your
less.
silhouette or less, and there's no speed penalty for that.
Right. Um,
Previously, it used to be like with vehicles, it was, like half your height or less, right?
Yeah,
And
half your
then,
height or less incurred no penalty. Now it's if it's shorter than your silhouette, there's no penalty for moving through it. Presumably, if at the start of the game you said, "Hey, this thing is difficult terrain," it would still slow you down.
yeah,
Otherwise, by default, if you're moving, just doing a normal move with any type of mini in the game, from a trooper to an ATST, as long as the thing you're moving through is shorter than your silhouette, you don't incur a penalty and you don't have to slow down. So that would mean, unless uh, we're assuming the difficult terrain rules of, you know,
Yeah, well, I don't know why we
declaring it
need.
at the
I don't even know
start.
why we need to assume this. It doesn't talk anything about changing difficult terrain rules,
I
and I
know.
and I
That's what I'm
but it's not just you, Joe. I did see a lot of people making the same sort of assumption just because it's like, oh, I don't have to take a speed penalty for vaulting over a barricade anymore, and somehow people turn this into difficult terrain doesn't exist anymore. And I guess
right.
I don't know, are a lot of people
I
playing on
never.
tables where nothing is ever declared difficult terrain other than stuff that the troopers used to have to vault over?
Sometimes a lot of stuff is especially if there's not like an area terrain that doesn't look like something that would be hard to walk through. A lot of my games don't have any like official difficult terrain, but there was always the default that if it's shorter than you but taller than half of your height, it still slows you down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas,
Well,
which like a barrier, yeah.
troopers anyways, vehicles just straight up couldn't go over it.
So now basically for everything, you can go through anything without penalty if it's shorter than your silhouette, which uh
It's gonna be nice for some stuff like
the
like
mortar.
Yeah.
the Gav tank, because it used to have a hard time getting over a lot of stuff just because of
Because
how
it was so
short it
short.
was. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
effectively
its
now
height scale
doubling
isn't
the height of
that much, but
it's
but
well,
it
it's
but
still
it's more.
doubling the height of stuff it can get over. It can go over barricades now. I don't even think the Gav tank used to be able to go over barricades technically.
I think
Um,
it's
I forget. It might have
interesting with
changed at some point, but
obviously I think overall it sounds fine,
yeah,
but it sounds weird when I think of two specific things. One being like a mortar or an MK2, because from what we saw in their line of sight rules, those guys with the notch trooper bases have a silhouette that's about twice as tall as the mini themselves. So you could have a mortar standing behind like a huge wall, and he can just move through it without difficulty because the wall is shorter than his silhouette, even though it's twice as tall as the actual miniature. Feels
mm-hmm.
kind of weird.
on the other hand, are those like speed 1 anyways? So
No,
mm, is
The
speed 2?
the emplacement guys are speed one,
all right. Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
still, I mean, normally they'd never be able to get over that
Sorry,
at
I thought
all.
you
Now
meant
they can
just in
just
general going over the
oh
terrain would
no,
be speed one, is what I
yeah
thought you
those
were just
so
asking.
yeah so now things that would normally the mortar guy would never be able to cross in his wildest dreams. He can just leap over like a sprinter. The other thing that I thought was interesting is if you think about the ATST. Now let's just put a wall in front of the ATST that's the same height as the ATST minus like a millimeter. He can walk through that without any trouble if I'm reading this right, because the obstruction is shorter than its silhouette.
Yep.
So
And you could extend those legs really far if you wanted, right? Like
Uh-huh.
if you wanted to take advantage of that.
which also feels kind of weird. With other than those two specific
Gonna be
edge
a lot of
cases,
ATSTs walking up on top of buildings now, I think.
no, they can't. I don't. Does that will that let them change elevation? Because I think as long as it's, I don't know if an elevation change matters. I think it depends on the height of the place you're
Mm,
landing, whether you would need to climb or not. Because notch things
that's
can still
not
not
clear, I guess.
climb, which is the next thing we'll talk about once we're done figuring this out. I don't think, like, how high does it have to be to require a climb as opposed to just moving unhindered?
Well, because
Um,
the other thing they do say specifically, like kind of getting back to the difference of difficult terrain versus other terrain. I mean, this isn't part of the rules clip, but in the article they do say units may now move over obstacle terrain shorter than the height of their silhouette. So, I mean, it feels like it comes back to that definition of your terrain at the start of the game, right? These types of things are obstacles. Maybe they really just mean barriers. But yeah, I would think a house, you'd be like, well, a house is really a different type of terrain, so maybe won't apply to that. But, we don't have those rules in the article, so you know that I guess we don't know for sure. But yeah, it does seem like it's not supposed to apply to all terrain unilaterally all the time, right?
Oh, here's when you're allowed to do this move and it's not a climb. It says it may perform a standard move if the vertical distance changed is not greater than the height of the moving unit silhouette. So the
Yeah, so like I
ATSD,
said,
yeah, the
ATSD is going to
ATSD,
climb on top of buildings all the
Mm,
time now.
yeah, as long because
mm.
yeah, it's yeah, the ATSD can hop on a building because the building is shorter than the ATST, and therefore it does not require a climb. It still counts as a standard move because the thing it's moving through is shorter than its silhouette.
Yeah, yeah, it's
But
it's. I mean, it's just like how the rules work now. Only the height requirement or height maximum hasn't
yeah,
been increased from half to the full height.
I do feel like that obstacle terrain call out. It actually is a couple points in the rules clip too. Now that I look more closely, so I feel like that will or could matter.
You think the word obstacle might mean in the full rule books that we say, okay, that rock is an obstacle terrain. That building is a building terrain. This barrier
Yeah,
is an obstacle terrain, and therefore these movement
maybe.
rules only apply to those guys. Could be.
I think it's possible because it's just like a very specific word choice that they keep using. Obstacle terrain, overlap and obstacle terrain. And that reminds me of like how we have difficult terrain, area terrain, you know. So it feels like we don't know without the full rules, but it feels like a rule thing they're trying to say that it's like
I
only
mean,
really like how you
maybe,
defined it
I
at the
but
start.
but
if
but now once we're gonna get into climbing next, and in there it also talks
Yeah.
about climbing onto tall pieces of obstacle terrain. So are you saying
it sounds like that's
Mm,
just
then
how
that
they
would
refer to
then
true.
terrain.
that would
True.
just make it sound like, oh well, you can't climb onto a building because it's not obstacle terrain?
Yes, that's what I think.
I
It's
don't
definitely
think I
true.
think obstacle is a superfluous word. I would assume I'm
Mm.
gonna guess that obstacle has no definition and it's
Well,
just the
They just
same
I
as
keep
well no,
using it
it
like it's
could
so
be
specific, though.
saying to differentiate it from say area terrain.
area terrain. That makes sense. Yeah. It's probably area terrain and obstacle terrain.
Hmm.
Um I
We'll
I
see. Yeah, I mean, it's
there's
just
no I
I'm just
don't
trying to
know.
justify because it feels so weird to think about this ATST jumping like a height to. I don't know. You think they would have thought of
That's
that, but
my point.
That's the ATSD. It has one leg. It like rotates backwards until it lands on top of the building, and then it lifts itself up with that.
Yeah.
and then like the cockpit flips.
Yeah. This is perfectly legal physics.
Um I don't know if you'd think I'd know because I've spent so much time looking at the reference guide, but usually keywords remain bolded throughout all paragraphs. For example, in the climbing rule here, every time the word climb appears should be bolded, but it's not in their example. So I'm wondering if they're
Well,
doing away with
climb
that.
isn't a keyword though. It's just
An action.
uh,
It's a special thing. It's not. I'm not everything is a keyword, but it's still maybe they only
Special
bold
rules
keywords.
thing. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. Maybe if obstacle terrain was bolded, it would mean something, but it's
yeah.
not. So it does. Anyways, let's talk about climbing. That's the other
This
thing
The
is
that's
for
bigger
me
thing.
the
probably
the
the
most
biggest change.
exciting part of this.
And I
Yes.
think, yeah, overall, I think this is good.
This is
Uh,
definitely
it
a
does have
good change.
it does have some implications that we'll talk about, but let's see what the difference is. It says sometimes units maneuver onto tall pieces of obstacle terrain. This is accomplished by performing a climb. If you got a notch base, you can't climb. Um, so to perform a climb, you do a move as normal, except you got to use a speed 1. A miniature may move vertical distance up to height 1 when making a climb, and may place the movement tool overlapping obstacle terrain that's taller than the height of the moving unit silhouette. So basically, if you want to go on top of something that's taller than your silhouette, you got to climb. And if you do that, just it's basically everybody has jump 1, but they got to use speed 1 to do it.
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah,
basically how it is,
Yeah,
which
and you'll notice
makes
that there's no mention of clamoring because clamoring no longer exists.
yeah,
thank
clamber
goodness.
is totally gone, which the rules for climbing and clambering as they exist or existed, I think were just prohibitively like complicated
Yeah,
and
I mean it
not
was always such a
not
pain.
necessarily
You first I mean it took you like how many actions to actually get up somewhere because you had to move
touch the
and
wall,
be in base contact. So you
And a safe move
so
and
to
then it
then
would
to
move
so
you
then
just
you
to
had
the
you
actions.
top of
start your
it.
to before you could start your clamor, you first had to be in base contact with whatever. Yeah. And then you had to do the climb and clamor and possibly fall have some of your guys fall and die. Um
You
and
Yeah,
really had to have scale for it, or jump, like you said, for it
yeah.
to even be
And
worthwhile getting
it
up
just
high,
and
right?
I've complained about this many times on the past. It just led to like when I would be setting up tables for events at our local store, I would set up some tables with like really cool verticality stuff going on, and the whole event everybody's just sitting down on the ground level, totally ignoring the elevation because climbing up to get up to those higher elevations was just uh, so prohibitive that it just was never worth taking the time to do usually.
here are some questions I have for you guys. I agree. I like this. I think it might have like gone too far in making climbing too easy. Just for well, but I think it's way better than what it was because now people will actually climb over stuff and terrain will get
Yeah.
used more and it'll be all a lot much more dynamic battles happening, I think. Uh, question number one, if let's say we got a bridge, okay, and your guys are under the bridge. If you had like Luke with jump, he can just hop from the floor to the bridge. Now with the new jump rules, or not the new climbing rules, technically, from what I can think, guys down there could just somehow magically be on top of the bridge. What do we think? Do we assume they have their own little ladder? They make a human pyramid? Like it makes less sense thematically to me because there's nothing them for actually to like climb up on. They're just floating to a platform that's above them.
Yeah.
Do we
I
think there
mean,
will be rules for
Hmm.
that
yeah,
specific edge case?
maybe there's going to be rules that are going to say like it has to be your movement has to be something that's actually in contact with the ground. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Hmm.
they're just going to say like, like thematically grappling hooks don't seem like they're a terribly uncommon thing in the Star Wars universe. So
But they're an item that you have to have
so
equipped.
yeah, but and maybe actually having the specific upgrade is going to do a thing because they do say they're going to be revisiting some abilities like expert climber and scale.
Right.
So we don't know how those are changing yet, but given the way things are now, I would assume like grappling hooks are maybe gonna say like you can climb height 2 instead of height 1.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that.
That would make
I'm very
sense.
curious how all of the movement-based keywords, of which there are a lot.
Yeah,
Jump,
because there's jump.
scale, expert climber, unhindered. There's a lot, and especially the vertical movement ones, because now if you had scale or expert climber, you had a huge advantage over everybody else. Now everybody else is kind of on that same playing field, so those have to be stepped up additionally to make, some sort of big
Uh
deal.
huh.
So I'm very curious how
Yeah,
how that's gonna be. I feel like it would have been nice for them to just show us that instead of making us wait
Yeah.
a month.
So
yeah.
Um,
We have to kind of
the
speculate,
things
but
I'm one thing I'm kind of curious about is say you've got like a thin wall
yes.
that
Okay.
you are nearby. It's
Too thin to stand a mini on top of.
uh-huh. And but it's like under height 1 but above your silhouette. Can you just speed 1 move through the wall essentially, climb up and climb back down all in one action? Um
Yeah.
is a thing
hard to
I
say.
wonder about. Or once you do your vertical movement, you know, does your mini have to be able to stay up at that level? Um,
May move a
Yeah,
vertical
because it
distance
says you have
height
to use
1.
them.
Place the movement tool overlapping obstacle terrain that is taller than the height of the movie.
Up
I don't
to
know.
maybe the vertical, the up and the down cannot exceed height one's distance, because that's a
I
climb
guess it
gets
does
you
say.
that far.
I guess it does say because a miniature may move a vertical distance up to height 1. So you'd be moving height 1 and then height 1 again. So maybe you'd have to have your
Yeah.
grappling hooks to
Hmm.
give you the height 2.
My next question for you guys is: does this under like does everybody with jump like become slightly less valuable? What does this do for the jump keyword? Is it way less cool than it used to be? Um,
A little bit, but I mean,
A
at the
little.
same time, they essentially can still do their climbing moving at full speed instead of only speed 1.
yeah.
So that's
And
nice.
and
Plus, yeah,
if what Leo was talking about too, that could apply if they can only go up on a normal climb and not up and back down. The jump would let you go completely over
Because I
things.
think technically
yeah,
jump
because
just says you can put yourself anywhere,
yeah, jump
ignoring things as
just
long
says
as you
ignore terrain when you're moving.
right. It's less because, for example, technically rules is worded with the jump keyword. Let's say you have this bridge, but now the bridge is a big landing platform. You're right in the middle of it. You could technically teleport straight up through it because you're ignoring terrain. The jump keyword does allow you to do that. There's almost never cases where that matters or happens, but that's a thing you can do with jump. I guess technically you do that with climb, but jump is less prohibitive than the new climbing rules, only slightly.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it certainly affects a jump 1 character a lot more than a jump 2. This new rule. Like Luke, I think is jump 1, and that's not hardly any
Yeah,
different.
yeah. Like I
But
said,
like
the only
Sabine or
difference is
someone,
he's moving speed 2 when he does
yeah.
his.
Yeah.
um, a big one for characters. So the panic rules are going to be a big thing for characters like Darth Vader, maybe even Palpatine. Darth Vader and Palpatine also now got huge. Basically, any Speed 1 character has just gotten a huge advantage because they're not with like a regular guy, well, I'm still slowing down when I climb. Those guys, that's already as fast as they can go, and now they can just go anywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think as far as we know, I
Now
think
they're finally going to
charge
be
and
recreating that Battlefront 2 experience when you would be playing Battlefront and you'd
Vader
see
like
Palpatine
floating
like
through the
woo, like
air.
Yeah.
jumping
Um,
out a million feet into the air.
I think a big one that's going to pop up, that's going to be very worth knowing is like what kind of move can you like trigger things like agile or relentless or uh I forget all the other ones. Basically anything that
Yeah.
triggers after you
I
do a
mean,
move. Will that work after a climb?
it says
It
you're
seems like,
performing a move as normal.
yeah.
So
So it seems
I
like
don't
it.
know. I
So
mean, I guess it's going to depend on
I could see it going either
like
way because
you
it
know
might
what,
be
maybe, and here would be a nice thing, maybe
it
we're
could eat
gonna get
Reddit
rid of
too,
that
but
all the shit with like standard move and trying to remember what is and is not a standard move. Like that's one thing I
yeah,
always hated. um
yeah.
so
yeah.
yeah, maybe if they simplified those triggers a little bit here in the updated rules, that would not be a bad thing.
That would be nice. I don't We'll see, I guess. But at least based on what we know, it seems like yeah, you could do Han doing steady a shot after he climbs.
Yeah. I
I think
think
you're gonna see snowtroopers jump up and then flamethrower people on the other side of a wall or something, right? I think it's gonna happen.
I mean, that's even yeah, with the way I play Han, I like to pop him in and out. Now I've got even more options. I can
Pop them
rather
up and
than
down.
popping left or right, I can pop them up and down. I think personally, I would think, if I was making it, I go, maybe they shouldn't get any bonuses after that because they're already getting this much mobility and, climbing, takes a lot of their focus away. But I think it would work fine if you didn't get any bonuses. But I
Yeah.
assume that we
There could
Yeah,
be
do.
an
because I mean,
errata on that
because
part.
characters who can you can be completely out of line of sight, pop up, do your attack, and then, you know, climb up, trigger steady or whatever, and do your attack, and then with your second move, climb back down. Um, you know, that could be a big buff to some characters.
Yeah. But we may see an errata later that's like,
Or like we
you
said,
know,
we just don't have the full rules yet, so we
Right.
can't. It's hard to
It's a very
say exactly how these changes are going to interact with other rules with 100% certainty, because we don't really know what all else is coming.
yeah, it's an incomplete
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, I
really.
mean,
So
now
we
that
kind of
being
have
said,
to see.
Are
AMG has
we?
said these four things are kind of like the four biggest changes, the four highlights. But, you know, that's not to say that there's not going to be more things. Like they
Yeah,
said,
I guess I'm assuming the rest of the changes will be small, like stuff and things that directly interact with these four things. Well, three. Nothing interacts with passing, I don't think. But like they said, scale and expert climber, all of those things will presumably be entirely different, whereas um, other smaller things maybe will just be some of the wording is going to be hopefully more clear.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm so curious about the keywords. Um, I want to like speculate, but it's kind of pointless. Like Leo said, maybe expert climber goes up to height 2, like Wookiees are good at climbing. I don't
mm-hmm.
or
Well,
scale
what
maybe
is
scale's like a free action climb. That would be cool because it's like you're using your little super grapple shooter and like jumping up quick like Batman. I don't know.
okay? Well, the way scale worked was you could move, and if you ended your movement and like the ledge, you could either for free go up or down.
Yeah, which is basically
I
what
can't even
everyone
think of
gets
how
now, basically.
Yeah.
better.
Um,
It's better than that now because you're not limited by being right on the edge. You just go as far as the movement tool gets you.
mhm.
Um, I can't even think of how you would translate scale to the new rules and
Yeah.
be somehow better. Like,
I don't know. I mean the main thing they have to keep them, or in my opinion, they have to keep them and make them worthwhile in some way. It would suck if it's like, sorry, Wookiees just lose all their keywords or whatever. Like they
yeah,
just
oh,
have nothing now.
you've got scale. Well, scale's just it's baked into the rules for climbing. Everybody has it now. Yeah, it's got to like still give some advantage.
Yeah.
Like maybe you just get full speed. So then now if
Then
you've
they're
Kind of
got
just
boring,
scale,
jumping.
but
Then
might
they
be
all
scale will
have
just
that.
have
Just turns
jump.
them into having jump one.
well, yeah,
But that'll
true.
be
Yeah,
even better than jump because as far as I know, you're not limited to one climb per
true.
because scale isn't an action like jump is. Jump
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
limited to once per activation. If scale worked like that, scale would be better than jump. Um an expert climber, which what expert climber is you just don't check for you don't roll the dice when you clamber.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't die.
Uh,
So that everyone gets
I
for
can say
free
the
too.
same. You just hey, you don't die. You don't.
Everyone's good at climbing.
Yeah.
But no, I could see it being like, yeah, maybe you get to do a height 2 climb instead of height 1 because you're a
Yeah.
faster climber or a free action. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Really hard
think
to
that
say.
was like the original intent of all the climbing was it takes a lot of time for these guys to do this. And but
It was
I
more realistic, but less
it was way too
fun.
clunky and no one ever had any reason to do it.
Yeah.
I assume climbing vehicle would be unchanged, basically. Be like, okay, ATRTs can climb
yeah. Yeah.
like other people. I
Right.
don't know that they
Yeah.
have to be special, but are
Yeah,
there any other
when it
special
says minute
climbing things?
yeah, when it says miniatures on notch bases may not climb, climbing vehicle says except for you is how I assume that'll go.
Or they
Which is
cross it out and say sorry. Because that one they did not mention in the article, unlike expert climber
Yeah.
and scale, they said have been revisited.
Yeah.
Maybe
It
climbing
just says
vehicle goes away.
it just says abilities or cards that involve climbing or clambering, like those two. But yeah, they. So I mean, obviously the door's
Like,
open for
yeah,
them to change more. I mean,
like
like I
2 of the
said, they
3,
already
yeah.
did bump up points on grappling hook, and everyone was sort of like, okay, that's a kind of a joke. Why did you do that? Like you said, this is probably why, because
Yeah.
grappling hook is maybe going to be slightly more attractive in the future.
Does grappling hooks give you
Mm.
scale or expert climber?
Expert climber.
Okay.
I think it's
Hmm.
the ascension. Was it? There's like ascension guns or something like
Yeah,
that. That
ascension
gives you.
cables. That gives you scale.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if that'll also change how if people will make slightly more interesting or dynamic tables, but everyone's already got all the terrain, so I don't know if that'll change too much. But we used to have some at the old game store that I don't ever won't play it anymore. They had a cool like indoor landing pad thing that you could, if you wanted, prop up on these things that made it super tall,
Oh yeah, yeah.
which was
I've had that
Mhm.
on tables before. We did get around that by like we always
Elevators.
yeah,
yeah.
we
We
said
always just said if
if you
you
can get in base contact with the tower base, you could just
yeah,
ride an elevator up to the top and come
that's
and
what we always did.
your unit like pops out here.
The other thing that I wonder if they would change about like height and stuff like that is I always felt it was weird that objectives were like infinite height for like holding an objective. So like when we would do terrain like that, you could be up on the top of a thing and holding uh an objective that's at the bottom.
Uh-huh.
Obviously not for like picking up a box, but for holding key positions or whichever one's
Right.
Yeah,
area.
because it just measures range, which as of now is still just a like a
Only
flat
ever
2D
horizontal.
thing.
Yeah. There's no vertical range measuring. I wonder if they would tweak that too, or maybe they see that it's working as intended. That's another reason that it's like, oh, it's another thing that incentivizes you to climb up high because you're not disincentivized by
Yeah.
Yeah.
being out of range anymore.
I
So
I
Here's
I don't know if they would change that necessarily.
it's not as annoying in the way. Mostly it's just, it's an unrealistic thing more than like an annoying gameplay thing. So
Yeah.
it might just
yeah.
be fine to keep.
Um, unless it's already in the jump rules, my suggestion, just putting this out there, that the jump should let you go that basically same way going up, but going down doesn't matter how far it is. Basically, if you're a Jedi or you got a jetpack, you should be able to jump from as high as you want and land safely. Not that maps will almost ever have that come into play, especially with people with jump 2 and 3, but still.
Yeah, there's not going to be much terrain ever taller than height 3 on a table. I
Yeah,
don't
well, I
think.
want I want
I
somebody to
don't
be able to jump
I've
off and go,
very
yeah,
rarely is there ever terrain even above height 2.
yeah.
Um
Until now,
maybe on that one table from
introducing
that one guy who's been defeated by snow speeders too many times. He's all like, I'm gonna put some really tall terrain in here, because
the Jodo cast introduces the first ever height 5 terrain. What about like the Kashyyyk trees? Sometimes I see people have you
yeah.
get
I
one that's
mean,
like three
I mean, like
feet
a
tall or something.
scale,
I mean,
yeah,
and
scale appropriate
technically,
Kashyyyk.
technically, sometimes I mean we've played like when we set up sort of like an Endor table, we just like we'll put a trees that they're only like 6 inches tall or whatever, just like the tree trunks that you see a
Uh-huh.
lot of times on Endor tables, and then we say these are height infinite, so you
Right.
can't like fly a snow speeder through them or whatever.
We
You know
need the
what I want?
full height now, and then you have to put it on the floor. You play on the floor because then the top of the tree is like way up here.
I want more tables that have something a lot of the maps in the old Wizards of the Coast miniatures game had. Basically pits. Areas that you would just say this is impassable uh with anything except like flying or jumping people. Just like, oh, this is like infinite depth and you can't get through here. How would the new rules let people cross through that? Because it's like, I guess, is it still a height
I mean, there's already
infinite
rules for
down?
impassable terrain in the game.
Right.
But you can like jump
Can
across speed one like the distance of you like leaping across a cliff, you know.
yeah.
Yahoo!
Yeah, all right. That's when they should bring back the clamber things where you have to see if they make the jump and then they fall, and then it sort of turns into like an RPG where you just make skill checks for all your
Yeah,
guys.
clamor's gone, but now vaulting is in the
Yeah,
game.
vaulting.
The fans are demanding it.
I want the parkour keyword. And you get style tokens.
Mm.
If you build up enough style tokens,
Every time
everyone's
you
really
vault a
impressed.
barricade, yeah, yeah,
Maybe they
yeah.
will when Reva gets added to the game.
Revan?
No, Reva. Riva?
Oh, Riva.
Riva. Is that how you said her name? Say her
I
name?
think her name is Riva.
Okay, yeah, Riva. Sure. Just because I remember the part where the scene, the episode where she's like chasing Obi-Wan across the rooftops
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yep.
And like, I remember that was a complaint I saw from people who were like, parkour. I don't know. That's, I didn't read their complaints too closely, so that's about all I got out of it. I enjoyed the show.
Well, that's movement, and obviously we don't know anything about like every other form of movement, like hover vehicles or
Hmm.
things like basically anything to do with vehicles is presumably unchanged,
Yeah,
but who
for the
knows?
most part, other than the height of terrain that they can go over.
And so before we wrap it up, I'm gonna assume we'll probably be back after we've gotten our hands on the full core rule book. But based on what we know here, would you consider? Let me read the quote from the first article. This is not an overhaul of the Legion rules you all know and love, all caps. Do you think that after seeing these four articles, is that a true statement?
It's a little hard to say. I mean, I feel like with what's just in the articles, maybe no, but kind of assuming that these changes extend into a lot of areas that haven't explicitly been said, then it's like maybe kind of yes. Kind of feels like a 1.3 type of thing, or maybe already past 1.3, but it's like I don't know.
Yeah,
It feels like if
It's not a
like
complete overhaul, but it's like it is like a lot of changes.
any one of these things wouldn't feel very out of place because things like this have changed throughout the life of the game where it's like okay this is going to be a little bit different now, but when it's all happening at the exact same time it feels like oh maybe this is a lot, maybe this is an overhaul.
That I think that's true. It's kind of like a ship of Theseus type thing, or like a frog in hot water type of thing, right? Because if it's actually kind of surprising that they didn't try to do like one or two of these at a time and like kind of roll them out slowly and see that they decide like we need to do these
Right.
all in one big
It's
go.
also going to be a lot for the players to be like here's a million new things I need to remember as opposed to okay here's one new thing I need to remember next month there'll be
Hmm.
one new thing.
Yeah,
Maybe they had their PDF and they didn't want to update it over and over again.
yeah. I don't know.
It's also if I'm not mistaken, I think the Las Vegas Open is 10 days after this comes out. And so there's like one of the biggest tournaments of the year will be like right off the heels of this and everyone's going
Oh
to be
man.
trying cuz
well, they might still go by the past rules because I mean I believe by the time the rule changes come out, you already have to have your lists locked in.
uh well they might still they don't have to have the rules locked in. You don't submit your preferred rule set with your list. The rules say it goes into effect on X date, and if the tournament happens after that date, I think you go by those rules.
I don't know. That's a
I mean, I've something
it's
I've seen a
weird
lot
either
of
way.
people complaining about because it seems like oh they're doing this without any regard for this large event of all of the most like
Yeah.
dedicated
Well, like I
players.
said,
Well,
I mean that also is, you know, I guess, like I said, I feel like that would also partially be up to the TOs, but I mean, Maybe not,
Yeah.
since it's also like a world's qualifying event.
Right.
I would say the one thing is, maybe this is more of an FFG thing, but typically when there have been like new releases and points updates and stuff, there's usually an effective date, right? Like
Mhm.
we know this is releasing on the 16th, but maybe it's not effective until the 31st or something. They haven't said that though, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not playing there, so not gonna
Yeah,
speak
because like
probably
the points
personally, but
updates came out, but technically the points update doesn't go into effect until mid January. Was it?
I
maybe
mean,
it's January 16th. I forget.
it's tough because I mean, like you said, if your list is locked in, you know, the new rules might be like, wow, expert climber's super good. I want to take it, but I, didn't know that back when the lists were locked and I
The
didn't take grappling hooks. So
January 1st is when the points adjustments go
yeah.
into effect.
Hmm.
And that
So
but that
people
came out,
have
but that came out, how long ago? So it's possible they'll hold off on putting an effective date or
yeah, I'll be curious because despite the intention of the core rulebook to basically smooth everything out and clear everything up, I know there'll be because that's what happens when you have a game and then you give it to I don't know how many people play Legion, but that's like why bugs pop up in video
thousands of
games and
people.
people are
Yeah.
the user base is so much more. People are going to find little interactions that aren't clear or will need rulings, and if those happen during the middle of like a world's qualifying event, it's going to be interesting. But oh well. I'm final thoughts is the new climbing rules seem pretty cool. The new other stuff, we'll see. I'm not
Yeah.
saying I don't. There's nothing. None of these rules that have come out makes me go, "Oh my god, they've killed Legion." I think all of them are either good or we'll
Kind of
see.
wait and see. Yeah.
Yeah, or
well, except for
just I
the
could see this
passing
going poorly,
times,
but I'm
right?
not
But
sure. It could be just fine. It could be fine. I could see it going bad, but it'll be fine. That's kind of my take so far. Except the pass rule is great. I love it. I'm gonna go over to Leo's place and play just so I can go pass. And you go, Gah!
you would.
uh
I don't know if
yes,
there's
that's
anything
that.
else to say. Yeah.
All right.
Pass. I passed
Pass.
on this video.